a Playlist original.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Live or die. Make your choice.
What are you waiting for, huh? What are you waiting for?
I'm not even gonna swat that fly. I hope they are watching. They'll see. They'll see and they'll know. And they'll say, why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
They're here.
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face. The blackest eyes. The devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster with your hosts, Gaius and Jackson. Our second spooky season episode, or I guess Tales of Horror, according to our podcast network. So that works. That works too.
Both work. Whatever you want to call it.
So yeah, like we said, we're doing all horror for the next 2 months because Jackson and I are both fans of horror movies and wanted to cover as much as we could. Since September is generally a pretty slow month, we want to also dedicate that month to horror as well.
Absolutely.
But in addition to highlighting movies, we're going to try to have a different horror related podcast on the show each week as a guest to kind of highlight their stuff as well. Last week we had Alex and Dean from the Return, Revenge, Resurrection podcast, and this week we have Brian and Steve from the Halloween is Forever podcast. So welcome both of you.
Yeah,
Yes, welcome guys.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Like I was telling Jackson, like I've been between Instagram and Twitter. Just I feel bad. I hope it didn't come off as spammy, but like telling people like, hey, like basically your podcast looks and sound interesting. Like, would you guys like to be on? And a lot of people have been interested. You're one of the ones that were willing to do it as long as scheduling worked out. And we know how hard these things are when everyone's in like completely different time zones. Like for myself, I'm in LA and Jackson is in Canada, so it's a struggle for us sometimes too.
We're Yinzers. We're East Coast, both in Pittsburgh, so we're on the other side of the spectrum. Yeah,
I'm in New Brunswick, so just north of you guys, East Coast Canada as well.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you're settling into a nice evening.
That's right. Exactly. You guys must be an hour behind me. Is it 10 to 7 or 10 to 8 where you guys are?
Yeah.
Not bad. Okay, right on. Good stuff. Yes.
and meanwhile, it's 4:50 here.
I've got a lot of East
Up to work
Coast.
today. I'm snuggling into my PJs, having a couple of drinks. You know.
That's right. Awesome.
I almost all of our guests. I can't think. I haven't found. I don't think anyone that's on my side. I thought it'd be easier to find West Coast people. Like usually the people that want to be on are like, oh yeah, I'm in New York. That's always East Coast. Or like, all right, well, I mean, it's fine for me, but I would like to make it work for you because I know it's later there.
Right.
But we usually make it work though.
Yeah, I think like 75% of horror podcasts are in New Jersey. So what I've learned, like every podcast is New Jersey or New York. So we're like we're Midwesterners basically. So we're the odd men out over here.
Right. And we've had guests on from New Jersey. I'm trying to think of who it was, but we definitely have people from New Jersey.
Is it Mark?
Is it Mark?
Yeah, I think it might be Mark.
I think it might be Mark too. That's who came to mind. But yeah, funny you say that. Yeah, shout out Mark.
So before we get into the movie that we're going to be covering today, you guys want to tell us a little bit about the Halloween is Forever podcast, when you guys got started, what made you want to start it, all that fun stuff. So the people that are listening, in case they haven't discovered you, maybe they will by listening to this episode.
Yeah, sure. Steve, you want to? Do you want me to?
I can give like a
rundown.
Yeah, I can give a quick background.
Cool.
Because it actually started with a beer podcast instead of a horror podcast. Because I had been doing a beer podcast with my friends for a couple years, and like we were all home brewers and everything. So we were just interviewing. We were interviewing like brewers and other personalities in the world, and a common friend between Brian and I put me on to Brian. He said, "Hey, Brian lives in the area, and he's a master of Cicerone, which is like, you know, one of the top levels of, you know, just beer knowledge and, you know, as far as you can find." But yeah, I was like, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll have him on." And we had him on an episode in January, and like we didn't talk beer at all. It was just like it was a joke episode. Okay. We talk sandwiches and horror movies, because that's the other things like that. That's the other commonalities we had. And we just like, because like there's a thing in the beer community called Dry January.
Oh,
so
yes.
So we're just like, we're going to do a Dry January episode and have like one of the, you know, top levels of beer mind, you know, in the country, if not the world, and then talk sandwiches and horror movies. So that's how Brian and I first met.
Yeah, Steve had all these like little quizzes and stuff. Like, it was a real meet cute, guys. We had Steve had all these like little horror movie quizzes about like sandwiches from certain areas, and I was like, this guy's fun. And I, you know, had guested on a lot of podcasts. Most of the time it was beer podcasts, because that's, you know, that's what I do for a living. And you know, I was like, man, I'm sick of talking about beer. I talk about beer all day in work. You know, I want to do something horror related, and you know, I was like, that'd be cool to do a podcast. And Steve was the first person that came to mind, and I reached out to him. I was like, hey, this might be a little forward. You want to do a beer podcast? And we have our other mutual friend Meg, who was our third co-host for the first 2 years of the podcast, and now she's kind of starting her own business and super busy. She's coming on for a bit of a reunion slobber knocker in October.
Nice,
but she's not on every episode anymore. So Steve and I are a 2-man operation now, but we're coming on. This will be our third Halloween.
Nice.
Doing the show. So we've been cranking it out for a while now. And so like you said, Halloween is forever. We've got you know, you can go on all the various social media outlets, you know, your Instagrams and TikTokies and all that stuff. Just at Halloween is forever, most of those places. But yeah, we put out a new episode every Monday. We typically do what we call mini-sodes, which are like 2 hours long still. We are nothing if not verbose. And then we just, you know, after a while, we just forget there's an audience, and it's just the two of us bullshitting about
that's
whatever.
The best episodes are when you're just chatting back and forth.
Yeah, we had to cut out a last episode. So we do what we call a showdown episode every Monday, where we have a guest, or I'm sorry, the first Monday of every month. We have a episode every Monday, but the first Monday of every month we do the showdown episode, where we pick a topic. It's this big thing where we have all these topics that are suggested from listeners. They have them vote on them, all this stuff. We pick a movie associated with that topic, and then we argue about whose movie is the best and why. And then we have to vote for the second place, and you know, somebody ends up taking home this championship belt that we have, right?
Neat.
And the last episode, we're also kind of wrestling nerds and beer nerds and horror nerds and just like all the stereotypical nerd things. And so we had the last episode, I think, was bordering on about 5 hours, and Steve had to cut a portion of the episode out where it was just us and our guest just talking about wrestling for a good 20 minutes. We're like, no, this has got to go. Like, this can't stay in the podcast. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. If nothing else, you know, we've made a lot of friends. We've, you know, had a really awesome, you know, steady and you know, loyal listenership that really engages with us and stuff, which is cool. And, you know, we talk about horror movies, our favorite ones, or sometimes just absolute dog shit ones. We do that a lot too. So, yeah, it's fun.
Excellent. Okay. So much.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
so much common ground with horror movies. It's brought so many people together, and that's something that Gaius and I just kind of discovered about ourselves after joining up together. Like, we both loved horror movies, but more so movies in general when we were first getting to know each other. And funny, we've heard that from a lot of other guests as well, that they bonded over horror in particular. There's just something about the genre that transcends just general love for cinema. But horror cinema is a completely different beast.
Well, I guess it's like maybe it's a little bit of that like bonding through trauma thing a little bit. And like we're both, Steve and I have both been watching horror movies since we were like definitely way too young to watch horror movies. So
count me in there too.
We had a similar experience as kids in that way. But now we've gotten to the point where we not only bond and become friends over horror. Now Steve is actively trying to end our friendship with movies by making me watch we have a Patreon exclusive podcast where he's making me watch every one of the Fast and the Furious movies. And we do a Patreon exclusive podcast where he just tortures me by making me watch and then discuss all the Fast and the Furious movies. So like I said, it's, movies started our friendship, and it feels like it's going to end. It's going to end it as well.
That's hilarious. And actually sounds like something I would do to someone to make them watch all of the Fast and the Furious.
This is a big fan of the Fast
franchise. I'm unapologetically a big fan of that franchise.
Well, that's Steve. And I would be snooty, and Steve's like the actual trained filmmaker of the two of us. I'm just like the jerk who likes to talk about horror movies, and Steve's the one who loves these movies, and I'm the like snooty one, like I'm not gonna watch that drivel. And he's like, you elitist piece of garbage, you're gonna
I feel that way sometimes, not about the Fast movies, but some movies in general. I gotta check myself sometimes.
So it's cool what you said about horror. I think like the horror genre, like you said, it does bring people together in a very fun way. A lot of our episodes that perform the best are the ones where we cover horror movies, like throughout our entire run. Whenever we need to get guests on and it's for a horror film, I tend to get more responses for guests for those more than any of the other stuff that we do. And it really is a kind of just a robust, fun group. I mean, it's like, and everyone kind of has like you said, I started watching them when I was probably way too young. I think I mentioned last week with the other podcast that was on with us that I watched Hellraiser and I was like 7 or 8. I have no business watching that young at all. And I told him like my mom was just kind of like I don't think I can do anything to stop it. I'm just gonna hope he knows what's real and what's not.
Cross your fingers.
I don't think my mom knew what Dad was watching when I was present, or she would not have appreciated that. But I have a very similar experience. Mostly my horror taste palette was cultivated from my father, just watching what he was watching, and I feel like a lot of people start off that way.
Yeah, I had a cool aunt. I know we've talked about on our show that she got me into all this stuff, and my brother as well. She was super into horror movies and Halloween and all that sort of thing. So she was very much my conduit. Steve, I just had bad parents.
I
was gonna say, Steve's was just more neglect,
or awesome parents. Depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, it wasn't even neglect because it was my parents who were into trauma movies. They were into like the Class of Nukem High films,
right?
And they like told me about them. And like there was just a time we went to Eagle Video. Sergeant Kabuki Man was up on the shelf, and I was like, "Oh, this looks fun." And my mom's like, "Oh, that's a trauma movie. All right, sure, fine." And that movie's way out of control for a child to pick up.
Yeah. My mom used to tell me when I was younger, she's like, we would go to the video store and like we'd be looking for something together, and then all of a sudden I just wouldn't be next to her, and she would just find me in the horror section looking at all these, of course, like VHS tapes, and you're looking at all these like the cover art, and the cover art is kind of what draws you to it sometimes.
Yes. Oh yeah, of course.
And she's just like, I don't. Why do you want to watch it? Like she just gave up on trying to stop it, and I really kind of on my own kind of fan of horror. Like my mom doesn't love them. There's certain ones that she of course saw growing up that stuck with her. Like she saw The Exorcist when I was in theaters, and she said that was one of the most actually horrifying experiences of her life. She had never seen anything like that before, of course. And she kind of told stories of like they had warnings up for people that they've had people fainting at the theater, just like people know. They were suggesting like if you were pregnant, you probably shouldn't watch the movie. They also gave my mom Toby. They were actually giving out like throw up bags, so people were throwing up and stuff at screenings for it back then.
Crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So like,
what a phenomenon that movie was.
Yeah, so she's like, so yeah, I've seen some of the biggies, and I don't really need to see any other ones really. She kind of leaves it at that. And I told Jackson last week, I have a younger brother, and he hated horror movies growing up. Like if he came in my room and there was like a moment that seemed scary, he would run out. Like even have to see the end result. And now that he's older, we actually go see him together. He actually enjoys them now.
That's awesome.
But when he was younger, it was like no way. But like yeah, I got into them on my own, and thankfully I had other friends who loved them. So like we'd be going back and forth to each other's houses, just watching them like over and over again. And I really do love that. Like I've told Jackson all the time that I kind of grew up in that time when like our generation, like slasher films, it was like when Scream kind of hit, and then everything that kind of came after that. Sure. That's when like so that was like a lot of fun, and all of our friends like had a lot of fun doing that, and then of course discovering like all the like older horror films too that kind of came before. It's like I don't know, it's so much fun. And I always think I've seen so many, and I've seen a lot, and then I have people that introduce new ones to me all the time, like Jackson did today for this.
I'm so surprised by that too.
Yeah, my letterbox never gets shorter. It always is getting longer. Like my to watch list. I think during COVID there was, I was at home, as a lot of us were, and I was watching, at least a couple movies a day. It was at some point in the year, and I was like, I've already watched 400 new movies this year, and I was like, and it's still like that list is still not wiped out. There's just so much. Especially some of those like adjacent genres that aren't necessarily exactly horror, but then once you start getting into that, and then the entire just insane world of like I went on a 2-month spree where all I was watching was like Taiwan horror flicks. You know what I mean?
Okay, cool.
And then
have you seen The Sadness?
We had the director of The Sadness on our show.
No fucking way. That is awesome.
Rob Jabaz came on, and he was honestly one of my favorite guests we ever had. We just, again, talking about getting just lost in a conversation. We did with him. He's such a just genuine, hardcore horror nerd to the millionth degree. And him just telling us about like scene by scene, all the insanity of shooting some of those scenes. And yeah, he was a super rad guy. I love that movie. Yeah.
That's so cool. Wow. As far as, I know it might be a loaded question, but if you want to give like one or a couple, what are, some horror movies that you like definitely just love, like that stand out for you? That's
how you get to know a person is asking.
Yeah.
I agree with you guys.
It's a great first question. Steve, go ahead. I think mine's easy because we talked about so many times, but I'm kind of interested to hear Steve's because his changes a lot.
Okay.
I mean, because I would try to give something from like almost every decade if I wanted to, and then get into every region. But so one of the things that's kind of maybe not be obvious to everybody, but like with Brian and I living in Western PA, we got exposed to the Night of the Living Dead series really early on because of George Romero's ties, and like literally everybody of a certain age out here has like at least a 6 degrees Kevin Bacon to one of the three one of the 3 films.
I forgot about that phenomenon.
Yeah. But it's like I think it was like my mom's cousin was a background zombie in Night of the Living Dead, and you can still go to all of the a lot of the shooting places. Like the mine from Day of the Dead, I've been in there, and it's just a storage mine. People just keep cars and shit in there. But like that's one of, I would say, Day of the Dead over Dawn of the Dead even is probably one of the films I direct people towards, just because it is so extreme, even by today's standards. Of like just the way people get torn apart in that film. It's so brutal and so violent, and you don't see it anywhere else. So I'd give that as like an 80s nod. And one of my more modern favorites is The Void.
I need to see that still.
Movie. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. It's a great film. It's fast paced. It never slows down in a way. It always ramps up. The next scene is always higher stakes than the previous one.
Mhm.
And so it's pretty much all practical effects, save for a few. And
The
so
hallmark of any great horror movie. Yeah.
Yeah. If you guys are familiar with Psycho Goreman, that seems to have been a more popular film. It's by the same director.
Oh, okay.
So
I'm
so
not,
that's
but
why
I've
it has-
heard of The Void.
Yeah. So
Nice.
that's why that one.
And
gets
a
a lot of love.
remarkably low budget for what he does with that movie. I love The Void.
Another
yeah.
hallmark of great horror movies
Yeah.
too, which
Yeah.
Frustratingly, it seems like more casual audiences would look at a low budget as a detriment to a movie and something to avoid, when that's so not the case, specifically in horror. It just makes, if anything, a strain on a director to force him to be a little bit more creative, which usually yields a better product. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's so true.
Yeah, we talk about the budgets and production. You know, we usually get, you know, not insane into the minutia, but we definitely get deep into, you know, the production value and stuff like that. The movies we talk about, and we love like looking and seeing what people did with that money. You know what I mean? Like we always talk about Joe Dante and Gremlins 2, the new batch, which is one of my favorite movies. And like it was a $40 million middle finger to the studio, you know? And then there's, you know, other movies where we're like, wow, they spent $35 million and they just turned it into a bunch of garbage CGI, and it looks horrible. And there's absolutely no love in this movie at all. But anyway, yeah, as far as mine's, I mean, the movie that turned me on to horror and still continues I'm a huge John Carpenter fan. It's like,
Let's go.
Who isn't, you know,
right.
Who's like, I don't care for Carpenter. You know, that's not something really often. I love Romero. But Toby Hooper, but I'm number one for me is John Carpenter, and Halloween 1978 is my favorite movie of all time.
Nice.
I've watched it a bajillion times, but you know, The Thing is definitely on its heels.
That's mine.
That's right there.
Very close to its heels.
Yeah. Again, it's like, how do you beat that? I would say, as far as like, those are kind of predictable. But I would say the one that, like, I mean, it's in recent years experienced a huge resurgence is not resurgence, but just upswing in popularity. But Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I have such an affection for that, the silliness, and then like the insane violence and creepiness that like betrays the silliness, and it's just such a like we talk about on the show a lot. I just love big swings and stuff that's just there's nothing I hate more than predictability in a horror movie and formulaic type of storylines. And this movie, you're just along for the ride. So I love that one.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'm a huge fan of the Universal monsters, the classic Universal monsters, the Invisible Man, you know, obviously Frankenstein, Dracula, Bride of Frankenstein.
Right.
I'm looking at a wall of crap that I have from all those movies in front of me. So yeah, those are definitely my big ones.
Nice. I'm glad that you mentioned John Carpenter, because Halloween was probably the one that, like, when I was younger, that really stuck with me, and it continues to stick with me as an adult. I mean, I actually still get kind of scared watching it as an adult. It has that effect on me still.
It's great. I mean, it's just that nothing is as atmospheric as that movie, and it's crazy. I remember the first time I saw the kind of behind the scenes ish of it back on VH1. You know, you remember they did I think it was AMC or TCM did like the equivalent of VH1 pop-up video, but they did it with facts. Movies. And they brought up like, you know, a bunch of little facts and stuff like that, and that was the first time like the wool that was over my eyes was pulled back a little bit, and they were like, look, there's a palm tree. And I was like, wait, this is in Illinois, you know? And I was, and it hasn't taken anything away from it for me. Like, and having seen it that many times and saw every little, kind of scratch and flaw and behind the scenes, you know, trick and that sort of stuff. It's still, it's still to me is October in the Midwest, you know, when I watch that movie. So,
yeah. I was telling Jackson, because where some of it was shot in Pasadena, it was like pretty close to where I'm at, and then they have one other location like in Hollywood too as well, and they're doing that 45 Years of Terror convention for Halloween again this year, and having a bunch of people from across all the movies, whether actors, whether it's filmmakers, writers, stuntmen, all that stuff, coming to this convention over 3 days. And it's near where a lot of this stuff was shot in Pasadena. So it is really cool to see certain places that they shot the film. Because, like, I mean, yeah, you're right. You know, you see a palm tree, you're like, oh, yeah, well, that gives away that they shot this in, like, California. It's like Southern California. But some of the locations, they really do, like, certain just streets looked like small, like, Midwest towns. Like, they just that strip of road does. Yeah, it's so crazy.
Yeah,
how,
like, you know, that street reminds me of, you know, a neighborhood I lived in Wisconsin. You know what I mean? And I'm sure a lot of it's just, you know, my brain laying that facade over it, but still, it's effective.
Yeah, it really is. And I love you said, like, the Thing has always been on Halloween's heels for me. It's always like a very close second. And then I also every time I watch it, I appreciate The Fog a bit more too. Every time I watch that movie.
It's another great one by Carp.
That's like my falling, like, I've seen it a million times, like my falling asleep movie. Just like
it's pretty like mellow throughout.
Well, and it's just Adrienne Barbeau. I could just listen to Adrienne
the
Barbeau
voice,
do her, you know, nighttime radio show into perpetuity.
Yeah, that's perfect. Jackson, what was it for you? I mean, I guess, would it be Halloween,
a favorite?
or is it,
well, certainly between, I mean, Carpenter aside, just in general, I mean, it's got to be The Thing for me. It's between the two. It's also The Thing. Halloween is up there too. I'd say for me, it's reversed, where that's the close second. Love them both, like, for incredible reasons too. But The Exorcist has always been up there as a favorite horror as well for me. One I appreciate more every time I see it. And on that note, actually, so I'm pretty sure The Exorcist also takes place in Pennsylvania, but it wasn't shot there, was it? I was curious if anyone knew, or
The Exorcist takes place in it's somewhere in New England, right? Why
I thought it was Boston, and then that's where the steps are, aren't they?
Is it Boston? Yeah, I know it was somewhere.
Is it Boston? Okay, I thought it was. Well, either way, East Coast.
Yeah. I knew it was a northeast city somewhere, but
okay. I was just curious if it was filmed there, if, like, you guys were close to any filming locations, but I'm not sure if it even was there. But regardless, I'm very excited. We'll be rewatching that in anticipation of Exorcist Believer this year. On that note, what are you guys thinking about that? Are you guys fans of David Gordon Green? Are you excited for his take on The Exorcist, or what are you guys leaning towards?
Steve, I'll let you.
Okay.
It's a mixed bag for me personally. I mean,
yeah, I'd say. I mean, it is for me too. But yeah, go ahead.
I'm pretty not interested at the moment. Just because, like, and it's not that I don't like David Gordon Green, because I actually started The Righteous Gemstones not too long ago. And he directs a bunch of episodes of that, and, like, that's one of the funniest shows that's out there. But I was so turned off by Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends that it didn't do it for me.
I like 2018, but then Kills was a different direction for me. I've only seen it the once, so, like, that could change, but I agree.
Yeah, and I like 2018. But it's a combination of things. Of one, I didn't love Kills and Ends, and just there's so many other Exorcist movies that keep getting done that it feels like it's just going to be more of a remake of those Exorcist films that are just kind of bland. Did anybody see the new one with Russell Crowe? The Pope's Exorcist?
Yeah, I did not. No,
I did. Yeah,
it looks pretty similar though, eh?
Yeah, it's like all the demon possession stuff. It's all the same. Like, there's nothing new about that. I kind of like. I mean, I like Russell Crowe in that movie. He's entertaining.
Yeah, he's on his own level. Yeah.
When he's not assaulting people with telephones, he's a great actor.
Right.
He's fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was the best part about it. Otherwise, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he's the best part of that film, but everything else is standard because, like, it's been done over and over and over again.
Agreed.
So I just don't see what this new film will bring to it. So I'll probably not see that until, like, it comes to VOD. And if it's good, since he's already promised a trilogy, if it's good, then maybe I'll pay attention to the sequels.
Detriment for something that would dissuade me from going to see it too is, like, why are you already lining up 3? We haven't even had the first, and just by nature of him tackling another legacy horror series, like, I'm kind of like, man, like, make your own sort of thing here, especially after a middling kind of series, like what he did with Halloween.
All right, listen, I'm going to step up here and defend this movie. So,
Okay.
no. I was the one of the three, you know, Meg included on the podcast, that I adored 2018. Like I, you know, being a hardcore fan of the original, and then, you know, with the exception of Season of the Witch, which has nothing to do with it, obviously the storyline of Michael Myers and all the craziness with the Myers family. I tend to like the movies less and less as the franchise goes on. You know, maybe there's a couple exceptions there. And I was just, you know, for many years, kind of almost a purist of the original. And even when I've heard people get, you know, people like to take their big swings and their hot takes in the horror community. And I've even heard people say in recent years that, you know, once upon a time, everyone hated Season of the Witch. Now everyone's in love with it. It's this huge cult thing. And I do love that movie, but I've even heard in recent years people saying just vulgar things like the second movie is as good as the first. And I'm like, you're insane. Halloween 2 is I love it, but it's not good. Right. I am a loyalist to the first movie.
Agreed.
And for that reason, I loved Halloween 2018. I mean, I walked out of the theater on opening night, like on cloud nine. I just loved it.
Nice. And that's a great feeling.
It was like I was just talking to strangers in the lobby just because, you know, you just got to get it off your chest how you're feeling about it. And then Halloween Kills, big step back. No, I don't think anybody loved that movie. It was chaotic. It was just unhinged and bizarre. But then I actually liked Halloween Ends. I came out of the theaters with mixed feelings, and then since then I've warmed up to it and really got to the place where I really like that movie. And Steve still just hates it.
I actually avoided it completely after I kind of knew, like I had a buddy see it first and kind of just filled me in on what, you know, the Spark Notes sort of version. And I was like, not for me, but I'm going to come around. I think this might be the year, just like it'll be my first Halloween on our podcast. And obviously going to be covering the original. I may as well I've seen 18 enough times. I don't really need to see it again, but I might rewatch Kills, have a definitive opinion, and then may as well just cap it off with Ends. So I think
Kills shouldn't have existed. It should have been two movies.
It should have been two.
The first one, and then there should have been just the second two should have been one movie. They really stretched it thin in the middle there. But I walked out of the theater and there was people just like in the parking lot, like, what the hell was that? Like people were mad.
I was one of those people.
Yeah.
I was one of those
people. I was telling when we saw Halloween Ends on opening night, I said this last week. It was a packed theater, even though it had that like day and date thing in theaters in Peacock. It was still a packed opening night, and I was like, I could feel the physical disdain from everyone in that theater as we were leaving. Like no one seemed happy, and then I was like, and then when I kind of got home, I was like, I don't think I hated it. It wasn't what I expected it to be, but. People
always hate new characters at first when you bring them in.
Can I infect you guys with an idea?
Don't you do it.
I brought this to Brian and it upset him very much. Halloween Ends is a Spider-Man film. If you look at the structure, you have Corey Cunningham, which is the same naming convention as Stan Lee, Peter Parker.
Yeah.
He gets his Michael Myers powers when Michael Myers grabs him, which is essentially the same as a spider bite.
Yeah, Michael Myers is a radioactive spider.
Yeah, he loses his glasses just like Peter Parker when he's thrown off the bridge by the bad guys, and he emerges from the pipe a new superhero.
Okay.
And his girlfriend is a redhead, so.
Oh, there you go. That's a nice touch. That's an interesting analogy. I haven't seen it, so.
Steve likes to hurt me deep. He likes to cut me deep. Yeah.
Also, you think about his costume. He has the shitty scarecrow costume, which is just like it's a shitty homemade costume. But then, you know, much like Spider-Man, he drops the shitty wrestling outfit and he takes up the true mantle of Michael Myers and puts on the mask and the jumpsuit, which is just like Spider-Man getting his good suit. It's all there.
It's a pretty solid.
There's some similar dynamics there, without a doubt. I got to
explain how this is a problem. Explain how any of this is a problem.
I'm just saying. I'm not saying it's a problem. I just don't think it's a good Halloween movie. It's a great Spider-Man film. It rules.
You shut your mouth. But So
I liked it. I at least it did try to do something different. I was like, all right. I mean, I could appreciate that, but I also got why many people didn't, and the fact that people are still fighting about it on like Twitter all this time later, like, you know, there are people that think it's going to be years from now a misunderstood masterpiece, and I mean, it happened with Halloween 3, right? So I mean, I guess like some people view that as a misunderstood masterpiece too. So it could happen. In terms of kills, I support that a little bit more than I think the rest of the people I know, because I just thought it was fun. At least it was a step back as a film, but I just accepted it for like I had a good time watching it. I mean, it lived up to its title, so there was that.
Yeah, there you go. You can't take that away from it for sure. Yeah. And Michael is great in that movie. He's just doing what he does best.
And like, you know, there's some great stuff here. Like Jackson and I talk about it all the time, but that opening, like kind of callback to the 78 thing that they did at the beginning was really good. And I don't know. I think it's fun, but I understand why, even as a whole, that trilogy is like polarizing for some people. Like I have people that I know that don't even love 2018. They love H2O more. They think that's a better, like, you know, Return of Laurie Strode than like, right. So everyone, like you said, Brian, sometimes people have that's not really a vulgar like hot take, but some people do have them eventually where you're like, oh wow, where'd that come from, and what
it'll come to there's only a matter of time before everyone says Resurrection's the best movie in the franchise, and you know, people just lose their mind. And you know,
it can't ever happen. Right. There's cartoon sound effects in that one.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah, it's the same as 5. 5 will never ascend either
because the Keystone Cops.
5 and Resurrection have cartoon sound effects, so they'll never ascend.
That's going to get super in fashion eventually. Cartoon sound effects, Looney Tunes.
Everything rears its head again later in film trends. Yeah, so
I mean, kids are wearing you know, freaking bell bottoms now, guys. Come on, that's like the third time bell bottoms have come back. It's coming back.
I'll never die.
Yeah. Ultimately, I took us way off topic, but the reason I was saying this is I like that he takes big swings and he's not afraid to piss off you know,
David Gordon Green.
He's not afraid to, you know, piss off the kind of toxic elements of the fan base. So I do like that he there's no a huge Halloween fan. There's no horror fan base that's more toxic than the Halloween fan base potentially. So I do hope that he takes a big swing with the Exorcist ones too.
He's a real Ryan Johnson, you might say.
Yeah.
yeah. By the way, the Scream fan base is pretty bad too. They're kind of up there.
Yeah.
Sometimes
are they? Yeah, I'm not as in tune with that, but
there's some hot takes from that when they get upset about things not going their way. But it's so funny that you see, like, I see people saying that, well, because they hate In so much that they're like, Resurrection was a better film. Like, I don't think so, but whatever. And then also in the wake of Halloween Ends, people have gone back and watched the 2 Rob Zombie movies, and they think those are really good.
I'm partial to Rob Zombie. Not maybe the second as much, but the first I really do.
We're big Bobby Zombo fans over on our podcast. So the music, that's awesome. We celebrate his entire portfolio.
There you go. Yeah. I haven't seen all of his movies, but I do like majority of his that I've seen. I don't know that I'll ever go for his Monsters movie, but
see, listen, we
one day
we burn through we dig through the ditches, we burn through the witches, you know, we do all the Rob.
That's right. Nice little touch there.
I like that.
Dracula reference. That's awesome. Yeah. All right. I do want to hijack here just because I know we can probably get into this for the rest of the time that we're on here. But I wanted to get to the movie that we're here to talk about, and I'm just curious. I've been dying to know your guys' experience with 2016's The Wailing. I know now that Gaius had not seen this movie until this morning, which is rare for us on the podcast. Normally he's throwing me on to movies that I had not seen. So I'm really interested to get his take on it too. And I'm curious, Brian and Steve, had you guys seen The Wailing before watching it for this episode, or was it a brand new watch for you guys? And either of you can take it first.
I mean, I'm in the same boat as Gaius. I hadn't seen it till today.
Had you heard of it?
All right.
I think I had heard of it.
Okay.
But like we already said everybody has a long letterbox. So
yeah, there you go.
I'll get to it. And it's not like I avoid Korean horror even because like we've done The Host. We've talked about I Saw the Devil on our show.
Yes, man. Awesome. Like, awesome flick.
Yeah. So like
I love doing that one too.
Yeah, I love a lot of the Korean horror that comes out. It's just, I just haven't gotten around to it.
Right on.
I was watching another Korean horror.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a long movie. So it's like,
there you go.
For me, I know and I had seen it, but I'd seen it for the first time within the last 2 or 3 years.
Nice. Me too, actually.
Yeah, so I think I watched it over COVID, but it is it's one of those ones that I definitely pushed down the list for a while because I'm like, it's like 2 hours and 45 minutes. Like that's a big investment. But yeah, I this is the first time, I'll be honest with you. This is the first time I remember really liking it the first time, or having a positive, kind of memory around the first viewing. But I didn't remember a lot about it. I remember there was a little girl, and I remembered the end. Like I remembered some elements of the ending, which is really shocking and
ending
awesome.
in the cave.
Right.
Yeah.
So I remembered that. But this is the first time that I actually really, because it gets pretty complicated, the plot. And it's easy to get lost, especially when you're like, half looking at your like, this is the thing where, of course, I was reading subtitles.
Yes.
And like, so you look away for a few minutes, you're like, oh boy, I'm
lost.
I'm lost and I ain't going to find my way again. So this is the time I really, I tried to stick close to it. And then even, watch some like kind of plot synopses, online after, just like, okay, did I fully understand what happened there? I still don't. There's still a few things I don't fully get, I think. But this is the first time I really, locked eyes with this film, I think. And oh man, it's a little long, but it's great. It doesn't drag. It's
right.
It's
just a lengthy story. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
There's a lot going on, but I feel like it earns its runtime. Gaius and I were talking about that before. But Gaius, what was your experience with The Wailing?
So Sally, not only did I hadn't seen it, like I hadn't even heard of it, so I felt like I almost felt like I was betraying like my like whatever love I have for horror movies. I was like, how did I miss this one? And so when you're like, I want to cover that one, I was like, oh cool. And then I looked it up and saw like the near universal praise that it got when it came out, and then I saw the runtime, and then I was like, that is a lot of movie, and that worried me a little bit, but I was like, you know what?
For sure.
If Jackson said it was good, I will give it a shot. I'm glad I watched it this morning and didn't try to like fit it in over the weekend because there was a lot going on, and I got to like sit and not be distracted by anything else while I was watching it. I agree with Brian. It moves really fast, despite the fact that it's really long. It doesn't drag really, and I like I told you offline, there's like a lot of it that just stuck with me. Like there's so much imagery in it that like I was like, I'm not gonna be able to like get that out of me for a little bit. And that's kind of like, I don't know, that's the sign of an effective horror film. And like it really did. When it was over, I was like, oh, like it's bleak, but it's it also like I just love like a lot of the stuff that I love like a lot what a lot of foreign horror films can do. That apparently that we can't do here. That
one of their strengths that they're not burdened by Hollywood.
Yeah, one of their strengths is that they just go there all the time, and it's like, then that's like, it gives you a more visceral reaction to what you're watching, but also I agree with Brian too. I think there was a moment where I got a call from work, and I was like, I'm not going to pause it because it's quick, and I didn't pay attention for like a minute, and then I was like, I gotta rewind it because I don't know what's going on now, and it was like it really was literally a minute, because you really have to pay attention. You can't just like it's not something you can throw on in the background,
especially when you're reading a movie.
exactly too. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought the performances were really great. It's shot beautifully. It's a beautiful looking movie too.
Yes, it is. Those landscape shots, the shots of the mountains,
especially at night, even like some of the outdoor scenes at night were so impressive to me. Like even like I don't even begin to know how to light that. Steve's probably a lot more knowledgeable than me on that, but like that outdoor scene, really right at the end. Where the father's talking to, I was just calling her the lady in white.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost like a Korean Japanese horror trope already. But, that when they're having an outdoor conversation, and it's like, they did such a great job of making it feel like it was a full moon outside at night in like. In the autumn, you know what I mean? And you have the corn, the kind of dried out like corn stalks, and it's just wow, that's such a gorgeous scene.
So just for like a little context of why it looks so good, because it struck me as well. The cinematographer on this film, before he did The Wailing, he did Snowpiercer, and after The Wailing, he did Parasite.
Okay,
there you go.
Pretty good pedigree there,
yeah. So. His name's Hong Kyung Po. But yeah, like just, you can tell from all the landscape stuff and just like you're saying, being able to shoot at night like that.
Yeah.
He definitely has a command of light, and has even like the shots of the village, the way everything is populated. Like there's so much just junk laying around in the village, but then also you get these little sparks of modernism that have like, kind of flooded into the town with like the cars. You know, the cars are far more modern than all the other kind of junk that's laying around that is like a lot of passed down, things just passed down or inherited.
Yeah, there's like earthenware pots and all this stuff, and then they're overleaning against the walls like a scooter, like a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Oh man, I after it was over, I was like, one, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I liked it, and now it will be one that I try to turn other people onto. So thank you, Jackson.
Of course.
For giving me one I had never heard of.
I owe some gratitude too. So one of my best friends, Cam, who for those who listened, I'm sure they feel like they probably know him at this point. He's like my guy with movies, like put me on a lot of stuff. And I was thinking about this, anticipating talking about it. And I can't remember when we watched it for the first time together. He had seen it the one time too. It would have been 2021 or 2022. I just can't remember how recently, but he showed me this. And just from the cover on the DVD of like, kind of like the archway over like the family's home, and like, it's all like a deep blue foreboding sort of like theme on the cover. It hooked me. I can't remember. He'll generally bring over a few movies and we'll kind of browse through and decide on what we're going to watch. And I remember being hooked by that cover of that DVD. And he kind of explained to me a little bit of like the story beats, and it hooked me right away. And I was like, I wanted to watch this. And I rarely pass up an opportunity to get in some foreign horror, especially towards the Asian side. Like I love what I've seen from that side of cinema. And so watching this a couple of years ago, it came to mind. Gaius and I were speculating on what we wanted to cover next, because we needed to fill a slot for spooky season. And this movie, for no apparent reason, just jumped to mind. And it was only my second watch. I split it up between yesterday and today, just due to time constraints. But I thoroughly enjoyed it more on second watch. And I thought it was a gamble when I suggested. I was like, I'm a little bit removed from this movie. I remember really thoroughly liking it, but it's a lengthy foreign horror, and I didn't know how that would necessarily resonate. I'm not sure how much of our audience had seen it or was familiar with it. I was very surprised to see that Gaius hadn't even heard of it. That's very rare, and I'm really glad though to have that experience talking about it, because like I said, normally I'm on the other side of that, but God, I really enjoyed the rewatch of this movie. I'm glad that you guys enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, I sent it over to my buddy when you suggested it, my buddy Chris, because he's a horror movie person too, and I was like, have you heard of this? And he immediately was like, oh, I've seen it. You haven't heard of it? And I was like, what? I mean, I was like, what was I doing in 2016 when I like missed it?
Well, this is like a good insider pick, I feel like, because whenever you guys mention it, I thought Steve was the one who had suggested this to me.
Okay.
But somebody else must have. So I feel like this is a movie that does get a lot of play word of mouth like that.
Definitely.
Yeah, it was actually one when I was telling Jackson too, when we were trying to look for people to be on it on this episode. More people were like, they were just super excited about it. I like seeing that, because I was like, dude, I mean, it made me feel even more bad that I hadn't heard of it, let alone saw it. But it's like I think you're right, kind of like a inside kind of favorite amongst horror fans.
Yeah.
I mean, it even won like the Fangoria Chainsaw Award for like best foreign film the year it came out. So like,
oh, fantastic.
There's a lot of people who know of it. It's just it got passed over by me for whatever reason, and Brian hadn't heard of it.
I got a question for those of you who might be more familiar with like the fundamentals of the Cannes Film Festival. I'm just seeing right on the cover there on IMDb, it says it's the official selection from Cannes that year in 2016, but I'm not really sure what exactly that means in the context of the festival, or if it's an award of some sort, or if it's just kind of on the radar.
No, they showed it at the film. They showed it at the film festival, but they showed it like out of competition, so it was just there to screen.
I see.
Like an exhibition viewing.
Yeah, okay. But that still builds interest and stuff like too. I mean, too. So it did, and it got a really, like I said, great reviews out of the gate when it.
Yeah, it's so rock on 99 on Rotten Tomatoes, which we were just discussing doesn't mean necessarily too much for anybody, but still, I mean, clearly high praise worldwide for it, which is, I think, deserving. I thought it was fantastic.
And I was just wondering who the bad apple was. I was like, I didn't like it.
You know what? Didn't care for it. Not a fan. You know, it's weird. Like these types of movies, and you know, there's you could probably put a whole host of Korean and Japanese, you know, ghost stories into this category. That like there is a sect of the American population that one just, you know, doesn't want to read a movie. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I get that.
But I'm not even like picking on, you know, American viewers as much as I think for some people the cultural hurdle to being able to understand like inflections and subtleties in dialogue,
right,
is a turnoff for people if they don't feel like they can pick up on some of the social cues and stuff like that in the dialogue. Then it's a turnoff for them.
Yep.
And I almost wonder if some of these movies that do, you know, pretty well or resonate well with Western audiences that are from Korea, Japan, Taiwan, wherever, oftentimes are like ultra emotionally charged movies. And I just, as like a, you know, not like by any means, you know, a scholar of Korean or Japanese or, you know, Asian horror in general, I've seen a lot of movies, but I just immediately associate the horror films of those cultures as being super emotionally charged. Agreed. And I don't know if that's just because those are the ones that resonate with Western audiences, because there's not a lot of guesswork when somebody's, you know, screaming and crying, you know, oh, that person seems upset, you know? Yeah. So I wonder if that has more to do with it. And if it was a little bit more subtle, maybe it would be lost on Western audiences. I don't know. That just was something I found myself kind of pondering while I was watching this.
I think you could be onto something there.
I don't know.
What I found interesting too, because like I'm guilty. I'm better at it now. I'm guilty of this sometimes with foreign films. Sometimes I don't give the time I probably should get to them, because sometimes you want to sit down and watch a movie, you have to devote a lot of time to like paying attention. And like you said, I think sometimes the emotion can get lost if there's like a disconnect in the language and all that, and you're reading along to kind of keep up with what's going on. Mm-hmm. But like this movie and Parasite was the same way for me, where I remember watching Parasite and I felt the same way while watching this. Is as I was watching it, I got so like lost in it that it almost didn't feel like I was reading along to anything. I felt like I was in complete understanding of like we were speaking the same language, and that's how like lost I got in it. And that's what needs to happen for me to really get into these kind of things. And that's what happened with this movie too, where it was like, all right, I don't even feel like I'm trying to pay attention anymore. I'm just like transfixed and hooked by what I'm watching. And that's I think I got by watching this.
Yeah, I think what a lot of us are experiencing is just like the masterful work of the director themselves. And because even taking it out of the world of Asian cinema, we can think of all of like Guillermo del Toro's Spanish language horror films. And it's the same thing. Is like there's a lot of emotion in there, but you can also, if you don't speak Spanish, you can just tell, you know, from the intonations and from the way people are acting, you know, what you're supposed to be feeling and experiencing. So it's just the hallmark of a good director that they can have their actors both pull off a physical performance that lets the audience know how they should be feeling, as well as just the visual language of the film itself. You know, the way, you know, things look dirty and dark and bleak compared to like, you know, the first half of this film, strangely, well, not first half hour of this film is strangely like comedic. There's a lot of
like it's almost slapstick. That's how
there are weird. Sorry,
I was hoping I wasn't reading that wrong when I was like,
no,
this feels very slapsticky, and I was fine with it. But I was like, that's interesting. But
they're doing bits. They're doing bits in the first half hour.
Like when the ghost is throwing rocks at him, that's funny.
You know, it is funny. Exactly.
I laughed out loud when the guy got struck by lightning. Like I don't know if I was supposed to.
I had forgotten that scene too, and that actually kind of threw me for a loop for a second. I was like, hey, that seems a little strange. And I think there might be a little bit more of a religious undertone there, because I'd forgotten how religiously charged and like biblically reminiscent this movie really was. Like there are a lot of hallmark or callbacks to like, I wouldn't really know the intricacies of like Korean religion or how similar it is like Christianity, or if they even practice that. I'm obviously not familiar with that, but there are undeniably a lot of parallels to like Christianity and just biblical sort of bits from in this movie. I'd be curious at the lightning. I'm not a religious scholar by any means.
Yeah, I think the lightning was more of for comedic effect because they do they do it twice, and it's both done in almost like a spooky haunted house way. Because the first time they do it is, when I have to give me 1 second. I got to bring up the characters' names. I'm going to forget the. It's when Jong-gu and his partner Oh Sung-bak are kind of in the police station together, and Oh Sung-bak is telling him almost a ghost story of the demon in the woods, and then they cut to the police station and they have the fucking lightning flash. Like it's like it's a spooky haunted house story time.
And they're both like, oh, they're both like scared.
Them freaking out in the station like had me busting a gut laughing.
That was the funniest thing when they see the woman sitting outside, she's naked, and they're just like arguing back and forth about like,
you go out there, you go check it out.
Look. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
So I don't think that was so much religiously tied as it's just like we're just gonna do bits for the first 40 minutes until like he does the shop owner gets struck by lightning,
right?
And that's really the turn of the film.
Yeah,
that's when it gets serious because then they got to take him to the hospital and they see the other victim in the hospital and he's just completely like pulling himself apart to the point that he breaks his own clavicle.
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
Then it becomes real.
Yeah, I think too. I appreciated it as it was going on, and that now that we were talking about it, that there is some of that levity at the start, like because there's not a whole lot of it after at all, really. And there's all some stuff that was like, oh well, now things are getting very serious.
Yes.
So I that levity was probably necessary to have. But I'm glad I wasn't the only one. I was like, this feels like I almost can hear like that kind of music playing underneath some of these scenes, like watching these guys like kind of goof off and the way they're interacting and stuff.
Right.
But it worked. It didn't feel out of place for me. I just thought it was interesting how that was all framed together like that.
That whole character of the I guess I'll call him like the herbalist guy, who falls down the hill with the deer on his back. He does it.
Yeah,
he's just such a funny character. That scene of them having the conversation in his shop about what happened to him, and the one character is like super into it, and is like riveted by what he's saying, and his partner's kind of like laughing at him off to the side.
Not taking it seriously.
Such a great scene.
Absolutely. That scene actually of the story, or the scene that he is describing to them, and when you see it from his perspective, when he wakes up after falling down the hill and hitting his head on the rock, when he's like just seeing the Japanese man like eat that corpse, and then he looks up and he's gone, and he hears the twig and he's like kind of looking, knowing what he's about to see, and he comes over the rock. You really see him in his form for the first time with the glowing red eyes, like just haunting stuff. I love the reason that I think maybe subconsciously why I chose this movie is because it has themes that are present in some of my favorite like tropes and horror genres would be like possession movies and movies basically where there's a curse involved. I always find those like the freaky ones.
Sure.
And really for that reason, love the character of like the Japanese man being like the foreigner in town that's there fishing for victims. I love how the movie opens with him fishing in the river, and then you hear the shaman. I think it's a shaman character who describes later what he was doing, how his daughter kind of just took the bait, how he was just there not really knowing what he was going to find for victims, and whoever he kind of came across was who was destined to be cursed. That's always resonated me with this movie. And I think that's sort of why this movie popped into mind and why I love it as much as I do, is because it has that sort of genre feel that I love in Western movies. Like movies about curses have always really appealed to me. But there's a lot of different elements of different subgenres in this movie. I feel like it's kind of, it wears a lot of different hats.
It does.
Yeah.
That was it's think about it for. Oh yeah, go ahead, man.
No, I was gonna say it's just very similar. Like I've been watching a lot of Korean detective films as well. I don't know. I've been on a kick with that. But like, if you guys seen Decision to Leave, that's fantastic.
Ooh, I need to. Yeah.
But it's it's in the same vein of just like a really long story that is told really well. But like this feels, it starts very similar to like a detective film, and like that's why the character is kind of oafish, and they're, everybody is a little, off kilter, like they're not, fully on board, and that's why the switch to a horror film is so important, because it takes you out of, oh, this isn't a detective film. This isn't,
right.
We're not trying to discover that. We're trying to discover a ghost. But I don't know, maybe it was just me, but like even for a while, I thought it was going to switch back to a detective film, because they get so into blending religion, because you mentioned there's a lot of Christianity and a lot of Christian themes,
right?
And there's like a couple Christian characters in this. Then you have the Japanese character performing his rituals, and you have the shaman performing, I assume, more traditional Korean rituals.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. He was he was doing like the folk magic,
right,
to remove whatever protection was on the house or whatever.
Yeah, to remove the demon from the girl, and everybody's doing different rituals. And I was just wondering if this movie was going to end with somebody, coming back with lab reports and saying, all right, you goddamn hillbillies. Like that's enough. Knock all this bunk off.
Stop eating fucked up mushrooms. That's what's causing all this. Yeah.
Stop pulling shit out of the woods. You all have it. You all got a stomach parasite from a deer.
It's because you ate that soy sauce with the crow in it, or raven.
Right.
There you go. Right. Yeah. Well, here's a question for you on the note of like the shaman and the ritual. Did you guys see was that a curveball for you guys, or did anybody see that coming, where he ended up not really he ended up being in cahoots with the Japanese guy, the demon there? Because I kind of even forgot about his. No, I even on my rewatch I had forgotten how his character ended up.
The nature of his character I had completely forgotten or missed, or didn't pay close enough attention to the first one. And I think the first time I watched it, I didn't actually pay close enough attention to understand that he was basically a little minion of the actual demon.
Right.
And because I was very confused, and I did a little bit of research afterwards, just like, other people's takes on it and stuff like that. And that's when I think I actually understood what role he played as the shaman. You could tell he's kind of a scumbag, right? That's the character they're playing him out to be. He's like taking advantage of these people that are in a really tough situation, asking for exorbitant amounts of money. He's obviously got all this bravado. He wears the suit. Like you can tell he's up to no good, right?
Right.
But I was super confused. And one of the things I still am a little bit confused about was the locust scene, where he's like going to Seoul. And he's like, all right, I'm out. Was he trying to leave? And then the demon that's how the demon called him back?
Well, yeah, you're right on the right path. And this is, again, not I borrowed this interpretation because I was a little bit confused, because you're under the impression that he is also being targeted by this demon for helping this family by ridding the girl of the possession. But so how it was explained by whoever I'd seen it from, I think it was Foundflix, who's I recommend to anybody who's into like in-depth analyses of movies. Foundflix on YouTube is great. And his interpretation was like, so at some point we don't see this is off screen, but the shaman is alluded to have like made a deal with the devil, or like the Japanese demon character, and probably for status, for wealth, for these typical reasons. And him being sort of challenged by the woman in white, who ends up sort of being the counter, like the angel, I guess, if you could, that is opposed to the demon, when she like is outside the house and like making him vomit blood and that goop that comes up, which is a crazy disturbing scene.
I know, that was such a cool
comically long. It's like, when is this gonna end?
Great effects. It was like Team America almost, but
that's exactly what I thought.
Or How High. Have you guys ever seen How High?
No, I have not.
Where the Japanese kid pukes everywhere. Like, it reminded me.
So I think that scene was enough for him to sort of bail on his deal with that demon, and he was like, this is too much for me, so he's gonna flee to Seoul. And then the hallucination of the locust slamming into his car was sort of the demon, or the devil, however you want to interpret his character, sort of calling him back because he hasn't completed his task yet. So
that makes sense. Then that's kind of what I was that's kind of what I was thinking was the case. I was also confused. I thought all of the Korean folk ritual that the shaman was doing, which I might be misrepresenting that, but that's the only way I can describe it.
Same here. Yeah.
It is I thought that was all just for show, right? To just say like, hey, we're just fleecing this family. This is all for show.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it was having an effect on the demon, I was like, is that supposed to be coincidental? I was like, because when he came and was like pointed up to the soy sauce, vessel we were talking about, he knocked him, it had a dead bird in it.
Yeah.
And he was like, that's a part of the spell that's on you guys. That just reeked of like snake oil salesman kind of, hey,
then
look,
he planted
that. Right. But then the interpretation I read online, which sounded like it made sense, was that along with what he was ultimately trying to remove during the ritual was actually the woman in white's protection.
Exactly. To protect the family, I guess, from the demon's hex or whatever.
Yes, she put these protections on them, and that whole kind of backward way of saying, no, I'm a shaman, I'm going to remove what's happening for your family. Is actually an opportunity to be on their land and to remove what she had done.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I gotta admit, I'm a little confused as to the correlation between like the shaman's ritual and how that seemed to be impacting the Japanese man, because you also see like it's pretty cut and clear when he's like jamming those spikes into that figure that's supposed to represent what we think is like the demon. It's also contorting the girl. She's like feeling it, but it's doing the same thing to the Japanese man. And then instantly when he stops, when the father interrupts the ceremony and asks him to leave, that's when the Japanese man sort of like rejuvenates and like is not being affected anymore. I'm a little confused about, maybe it was just sort of like he had to go through it at the same time.
I almost took it as like, him, that ritual, again, this is just my interpretation, it's totally speculation. I took it as the shaman was essentially like almost opening up some sort of passageway or portal through the protection that was put on the house. So while he was doing all this, and it was almost like, I was imagining kind of a portal that was being opened up for the demon to get in there. And then whenever, the father, I already forget the character's name, but then the father finally is like, no, this is obviously something instinctually tells him this is wrong. This is all wrong. Then he stops it. And then that's why, going through that was putting the demon in harm's way. Mm-hmm. And whenever it stopped, he kind of got, booted out, if you will, of the entrance he was trying to get in there with. Like, again, but it was meant to almost be a red herring of sorts.
Yeah. I mean, it may even be as simple as the demon was trying to leave that body and take over the girl's body.
Oh, there
you
go.
It's like a new vessel, which is why they were experiencing the same thing, and why he came back to his old body, because he got kicked out because the ceremony wasn't complete. So
yeah,
I like that.
It could be a possibility as well.
Yeah.
When I was done watching it and just having to read up on like what other people had to say about it, and when they were speaking, they spoke to the director a lot, and you're talking about the role of like Christianity and faith and religion and all that. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of that, he said the starting point for the film, and he said that it materialized following the deaths of several people close to him. He said the deaths were unrelated and tragically not of natural causes, and this cluster of locks took an emotional toll on him and kept making him ask the question, why did they have to be victims of all people? Basically, why did these people have to die that way?
Right.
And he said that it's reflected in the movie through the fishing metaphor, like when the shaman tells us the evil spirit is like a fisherman, simply seeing what it catches, no rhyme or reason. But those affected find themselves asking, why me? Why my family? Why is any of this happening? What can I do about it? And he's saying that is like what was the core of.
Oh, that's great.
I think that's fantastic.
Well, and it also that helps it, the religious aspects of it make so much more sense to me, because one of the big questions I had, or thing that I guess the only thing that really kind of didn't sit well with me, was the idea that there really was never much of an opportunity for redemption for the father and his family. It was like he was a victim of circumstance.
Yeah.
And I was like, what happened to make him deserve this? Right. Mm-hmm. And he says something to the effect of like, that he had doubted, there was some suggestion that he had like not had 100% faith. And I was like,
right.
Faith in what? Faith in a strange woman you met because she was throwing rocks at you, and is frankly not doing a very convincing job of explaining explaining anything. The whole scene with her sitting there and the three crows, or of the rooster or whatever it is.
Yeah,
and I'm just like, who would believe her over other people that at least he knows what the shaman was doing was having an effect, whether it was true or false.
Yeah. But also, like, so in that scene, like, she tells him, it's like, the reason why this is happening to you is because you doubted. And it's not just doubting her, but it's doubting his own dreams, because the demon appeared to him in his dreams first before she showed it to him. And then it's doubting everybody else around him who had been telling him that the Japanese man was evil. Because it's the shop owner. It's it's one of his coworkers that comes in and tells him that the Japanese man, raped a woman. Yeah. By the shoreline. So he's had all these clues leading up to it. That's one of the things I really like about this film, is that, like, it gives you clues ahead of time. You can go back. Because like, it gives you clues about the shaman. When he's getting rocks thrown at him, when Officer Daddy's getting rocks thrown at him by the mysterious woman.
Yes.
She tells him, like, oh, this happened because they rejected the shaman. And that doesn't make sense at the time, but now you can look back and say, oh, the shaman went back and set that house on fire.
Yeah.
He started the
physically
burn.
It happened. Yeah. The fire.
Yeah.
It's weird because but it still doesn't sit super well with me, because the powers of good didn't try that hard. You know what I mean? It's like, when it's like
but also
expectations on him are
very high. Yeah.
Oh, and also the Japanese guy, even as a viewer, and you're of course putting yourself in Officer Daddy, we'll call him Officer Daddy's position. You're like, okay, and this is, as a viewer, I'm thinking this as well. It's like, oh no, they're just blaming the foreigner. You know what I mean? There's the one poor old Japanese guy, doesn't speak the language, and he's just being scapegoated. So it's like, why would it almost seems morally preferable for him to question things.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, that's how the film tricks you, though.
Exactly.
The film
it does. Exactly. You're right.
How evil...
the film wants you to feel like sympathy for the Japanese man. Like that when he jumps off the cliff, all that time they spend with him writhing in pain and hiding from the mob. Like, if they remove that, you don't feel the sympathy. You're supposed to feel the sympathy of him. Or like, oh man, they're just really dogging this guy, and that's fucking bad.
It's not.
They're the evil ones.
Well, and they did that masterfully. I guess it's just like, from the perspective of the main character, what would have led him to? Is the moral of the story blindly follow your initial instinct and listen to everybody else and don't question anything? Like, if the moral of the story is that, then that perhaps has a something to. It explains what the director has to say about religion, maybe.
Yeah. The moral of the story is to not listen to your mother-in-law, because she's the one who brings in the shaman.
Yeah, that's true. Upon a bad recommendation,
yes, and like insist upon it too.
Yeah.
So how I look at it, and maybe this will, it may or may not rectify your dissatisfaction with like the moral quandary, Brian. But I look at it as like, regardless of why or how, this family, and I guess I'm just because I have IMDb open in front of me, Officer Daddy's character's name, and I'd forgotten which order it was, but it's John Gu.
John Gu.
So John Gu, regardless of why or how, he is affected, tempted, targeted, if you will, by evil, by the Japanese demon. It's why isn't so much important so much as he has the opportunity in the last act of the film to like follow, have faith in that the woman in white would have the solution, and if he had to listen to her and stayed for the sound of the third rooster call. She explicitly tells him, by the way, whether or not you believe me or not, if you go to your house, your whole family's going to die. Do with that what you will. So I think like the message is, it's a test of faith, which ultimately him and countless others, as we see in photographs, had failed before. And it's not perfect, but I think that is kind of sort of harkening back to like the problem with like religion and the conversations that we have over millennia about, is God real or not? Do you either have faith or you don't? And here's what happens. You're destined for hell or torment if you don't have this faith. So
yeah, God's kind of apathetic in this.
Exactly.
Like
yeah.
he's just like, I'm
not perfect.
I'm going to tell you the rules.
Yeah.
You can listen to them or not, but if you don't, ain't going to be great for you. But I'm going to make it hard for you to follow them. Like I'm going to make it really hard for you to believe in me.
Which is why
I guess it is a good allegory in that sense. Yeah.
That's how I look at it. The allegory of faith and of religion. And I think that probably ties into why the rewards of having faith and belief in God are so high for passing all these tests, because they're not easy, and why ultimately the sacrifice and what you go through for failing that test in faith is so horrible. And I'm a sucker for movies that don't have a good ending, which is very common, I feel like, in Korean cinema.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, part of the reason too why I love the ending of this movie too, because I wouldn't have wanted to end any other way. Gaius and I, we talk about this quite a bit on our episodes. Like I'm a sucker just for the more depraved, demented, negative sort of ending for our characters, and so that's
if this
why
was a happy ending, it would
wouldn't have hit
outright.
I've greatly appreciated it, and my thing, we talk about this too. Like we are both like, this is so good. Like please stick the landing. I just need you to stick the landing, so I could really and especially with something like this being as long as it was. I mean, because I was like, if I'm going to get through all this, and then it's like, oh well, that's. I really liked like how it ended, and well, I mean, again, I don't think this happens a lot with like horror movies that are made here. There's a lot of, you know, let's try to like put like a positive spin on it. And I mean, like I'm really surprised when horror movies that come out here actually don't do that. Like, oh well, cool. But you know, that's not usually what most people want to see. But a lot of foreign horror films are like, they don't care about that. They're like, no, to go for it.
I wonder why that is.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just, they feel like they're not. I'm sure it is the case, but like maybe it's just a negative stereotype for American filmmaking, is like, you know, we're a little bit more slaves to the box office, maybe, or to our return on investment. And you know, I know in certain foreign, film markets, oftentimes some of these more like kind of, you know, for lack of a better term, artsy movies are actually, you know, have some sort of public funding associated with them, where, you know, I'm sure, and that's the case in the US to a certain extent, but probably not nearly as much in some other countries that might have more, you know, like social programs around the arts and stuff like that. But can I ask you guys one last question? Because I'm curious, and I'm sorry I'm bogarting this completely, but I have I want to hear if you guys, you know, have a different understanding of this, because I was a little bit confused by it.
Sure.
At the end, we've spoiled the hell out of this movie, so I won't say spoiler.
We do on all our movies.
We do.
Yeah, I'm sure. Listen at your own risk.
I'll put a warning in the description just in case.
So at the very end, the big reveal, right, where the demon shows his true form. Why does he have stigmata scars?
Stigmata? I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, the hands are from.
Stigmata. So stigmata is usually like basically like the wounds that like Jesus suffered through, right? Well, during the crucifixion.
Yeah.
So okay.
So like holes in the hand, holes in the palms of the hands, and usually in the feet from where he was nailed to the cross.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't think I noticed that.
Yeah. He had like one big hole in his hand. I think it's just him as a demon fucking with that character at that time.
Mocking, perhaps.
Because that character was a Christian character, so I think it was just him mocking him.
That was the nephew, the priest in training kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, that was the deacon. Because also at the same time, while he shows him the stigmata scar, he also is reciting the Bible verse from the beginning of the very opening of the film. That is, and that verse is basically Christ after he's resurrected, telling, you know, an apostle, like, you know, don't you believe in me? I'm not a ghost. I'm flesh and blood. So he's just reciting the thing that we started the film with as like a way to taunt the priest.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think you're right then. I think it's just a taunting thing. And the reason I asked was because, you know, as we were getting into the deeper religious allegories and you guys were shedding some light on the director's, you know, impression of tragedy in life and all that sort of thing, and being deserved, not deserved. I wondered if you guys thought that there was something else associated with that was kind of like blurring the lines between, you know, the forces of good and evil. But you're probably right. It was probably just more of a straight up, hey, I'm a demon doing demon shit, I'm just going to taunt you.
Yeah.
Right.
My evil knows no bounds.
Yeah. I think, Steve, yeah, you had it written nail on the head. And yeah, it's supposed to be like a coming back to faith in him being an actual demon and him needing to almost to prove it, sort of how Jesus had to some of his apostles. I can't remember which one, but there was one, I think, that famously didn't have faith until he saw with his own eyes. And I think that's tying back to that. But I honestly didn't even notice the stigmata, and I wasn't aware of that term, but that's I'd love to learn something new. So
was it Thomas or something like? I was going to say back to my Bible quizzing days as a kid. I was like,
it's Thomas that doesn't believe in the resurrection, and then just the parallel, because these scenes are occurring at the same time. They're parallel. Is the rooster crowing? That's also a Bible reference to Christ. Christ was explaining to Peter. It's before he's crucified, but he's like, you know, before this night's over, you'll deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. And so I think it's the same thing of like Officer Daddy denies who he should have faith in, you know, before the 3rd rooster crow. And he runs back, and that's what gets his family killed. So
we get way deep into religious stuff on our show.
It makes for the best storytelling. Like,
it really does.
So many fantastic stories.
Steve and I both grew up religious. You know, both grew up, you know, very Christian, and you know, are not anymore. But we, you know, it was so ingrained in us as kids that we like to torture our guests and Meg, our former co-host, a ton with that stuff.
Our co-host Meg grew up completely atheist. So now Brian and I have like all these weapons of like, you know, Bible lore and, you know, Sunday school to throw at her
so much, honestly. What were you gonna say, Gabe?
It's just usually pretty interesting though. Like, even if you aren't deeply religious, like having those kind of like complex stories where like someone's having like a crisis of like faith, and like you're taking on like a lot of this on chance. Like, I mean, like that's why so many people have issues dealing with or believing in a lot of religion, because for a lot of people, if they can't see it, if they can't manifest it, like it's not real to them. And that's always been like interesting storytelling to me. Like, even if you don't really like believe in everything, and then those people that do go all in and believe in something like that, you know, that's also pretty interesting too, that they have that much like faith in something that they can give themselves to this thing that, you know, they believe it's enough for them to believe it. And for some other people, it's like, if I can't see it and I can't feel it, then it's not real to me. So like,
great way to add complexity to a character, you know, either side they believe in, it doesn't matter, you know.
That's right.
So my question about this is, like, I don't know if you found more about this in your research, guys, but so we have all these mixings of religions, and we already kind of mentioned how this is photographed. You know, it's filmed in such a way that you see how so much of the world that they live in is inherited. We're not in like downtown Seoul where everything is modern and happening. They're living in like a lot of inherited houses that were probably built like pre-1950, and, you know, clay pots, earthenware, and, you know, just a lot of DIY, with the exception of their modern cars and, you know, the electricity in the homes. So it feels like, you know, all of that is inherited, and then you have all these religions come into play that also have like this inherited nature, because, you know, the mother-in-law is very, very into the shaman. Right. And you have like other characters that are really into Christianity. Like, did the director have more to say about that, as far as like how religion is like an inherited trait that you have to either have faith in or, you know, pull away from?
Yeah, he actually did talk about that in some of the, like, when they were asking him about the different themes of the movie, and that's what he kind of wanted to explore, because like I guess I just read here that he grew up Christian, and which is why like a lot of the story kind of forms there. But then he had his own personal like tragedies and stuff, and why that made him question why these things happen. And then he just kind of started talking to other people who follow different religions, and how they kind of interpret things, and how some people will essentially inherit other types of religions to deal with certain things that they're like going through, or to try to explain some of the things that they're going through. He didn't want it to make it just about Christian teams. I guess there's a lot of like different type of like Korean like folklore in this as well that he uses to explain a lot that of what's happening. But yeah, it's interesting too. I mean, for him to explore this many, I guess that explains why the movie is so long, because there's so many different themes to explore. Right. And it seems like, and all these like all these like personal connections that he personally had with them, and then also just from talking to other people and putting in some of their stories and like their beliefs, and like he kind of took a little bit of everything to kind of have like basically different pockets of all these different aspects of religion and faith and stuff like that. So
there's probably some more layers that maybe I'm and I probably collectively we are missing, just because we don't have an intimate knowledge of like Korean folk religion, Korean folk religions or something like that, But
yeah, I also, when I was watching it too, because like it's funny because like when you were talking about the new Exorcist, and we talked about it too, like we were watching that trailer for the first trailer, at least like we like the second one a little bit more, but the first trailer, it was just like, oh, this feels like every other demonic possession movie that's come out
right
post The Exorcist. But then I'm watching, and I know this is probably because like these kind of films aren't in at least in my like day-to-day viewing usually, and this makes me want to discover more of them. But then I'm looking at this today, and there's so many of those tropes that we do find in our horror movies, but they're presented in such a way that felt very like not familiar at all, and didn't feel like it was a rehash of something else. And it is dealing with it like kind of like the demonic possession, evil spirits, all that stuff that we see in like a lot of our movies. But I'm looking at it and it feels entirely new, and I know that a lot of it has to do with like these type of movies not being in my day-to-day viewing, but like it was really cool to see like something I'm usually so familiar with feel so new while watching it.
Right.
And I thought that was really cool.
Hear me out, guys. Ready? Pitching this idea. Bride of Exorcist. Just go completely. I understand they're priests, guys, but I'm just saying could be a fun new direction.
Could be Lutheran. I think Lutherans are allowed to marry.
Lutherans, that's what I grew up. Lutherans just Catholic light, and they are allowed to marry. And I actually had a female pastor in Lutheran.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
very, very progressive. I'm being sarcastic. I'm being sarcastic.
Right. That could be something. Pitch that to Rob Zombie.
If you have to pick a Christianity.
Oh man, we're gonna see that 5 years from now. Brian pitched that.
TM guys, TM.
Horror is in a sad state right now. I think at least generally, obviously there are some great movies that come through the muckage, but I wouldn't be surprised if anything is made these days. Certainly, we will eventually run out of remakes and reboots.
That's just the nature of film in general.
Yeah, right.
I feel like it's a pretty not to be argumentative, but like it's a pretty great time to be a horror fan, but it's a weird time to just be a film fan in general, because there's so many recycled ideas, and horror is no exception. You're seeing obviously tons of recycled ideas, but also seeing just like some of them I'm a sucker for, and some of them
others not so much. It's a very mixed bag.
Yeah.
Did you guys see Talk to Me? Just curious off.
Not yet.
Question.
I haven't either. I haven't seen it yet either.
Oh,
I've heard such good things.
I think you guys would love it. I think it was really good.
That talk about a spin on Possession. Yeah. Like nothing you'd seen.
We thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yes.
Yeah. I agree with you. It's a really good time to be a horror fan. I still laugh when it usually is Deadline or maybe Variety too. Well, every so often they'll come out with those articles. They're like, oh, like horror is big at the box office. Like it's been big the last like 4 or 5 years, maybe longer.
Yeah.
Like, they're really cheap to make, and they usually make a lot of money. I don't know why this is like still a surprise to like everyone in the industry, but they tend to.
Yeah, I found like a chart of like, you know, what's doing well at the box office, and like somewhere around 2019, like horror took off. Like horror commanded more of the market than it ever has before. Because like now it's reached almost, I think 2019 and 2020, it took about like 10% of the screens for the year, which is more than it ever has.
That's crazy.
Like the only genre that actually is tanking and doing bad is comedy. Like there are no straight comedy films; they're just tanking.
That's why we're seeing less, I guess.
You're seeing less of them. They usually go to streaming.
Yeah. And it's all the incorporation of like comedy bits in like Marvel films.
I was
like,
gonna say
everybody
some of
gets
these
comedy.
The last not Avengers, Guardians movie, it's a comedy.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's
Thor
so
as well.
jokey.
Yeah.
I mean, tons of horror movies are you know, super jokey. It's like comedy got absorbed into all the other genres or something.
Pretty much.
It's a sponge genre for sure.
Yeah, they just can't be like, you know, because someone will mention like, well, Barbie was a comedy that made so much money, but like a traditional like comedy in the ways we haven't seen that. There's usually has to be some kind of like spin or hook for it to like really take off, and like and you know you're not really seeing like you know the Judd Apatow stuff that we used to get or anything like that. Like that's not really happening much at all anymore.
Yeah, even the people who are, you know, probably the last, you know, previous or most recent generation of big, you know, comedy movie stars, you know, as Seth Rogen or you know, something like that. Like they're making not pure comedies anymore.
Exactly.
Right.
Like there isn't, I'm trying to think, there isn't really, I mean, maybe Kevin Hart. Like I'm trying to think of like who is there that's just doing straight comedies right now.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin Hart mostly does like action comedy.
I was gonna say he does more action comedies.
Comedies,
like,
well, I think the genre is definitely adapted and changed a little bit. It's going through a little bit of a metamorphosis where we're not seeing straight up comedies like we did most recently in the 2000s. And like any genre or trend, it's bound to change. I'm sure we'll get to a point where those become the norm again. But you're right. I think they do piggyback on a lot of other genres, kind of hide in the shadows these days.
Yeah, I listen. As far as the big budget, you know, kind of make a million sequels type of horror movies, it's like, listen, James Wan. I always use this analogy. James Wan can make as many freaking Conjuring universe movies as he wants, which I don't have an issue with them. I haven't seen a ton of them. They're not for me. But if he can do that, and that means I get one Malignant.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah,
then it was all worth it.
Yeah,
there you go. I'll make all of these. So if you let me make this one offbeat one, like
it used to be a one for me, one for you, one for me, one for you. Now it's 5 for you, 1 for me. But
you're so right.
I'm all right. I don't have to spend money on the other ones. That's fine.
Exactly.
Well, also you have to remember he dropped a ton of money on Malignant,
so
that's why that one. It's why it had to be 5. I'll do 5 Annabelles.
Well, that's the thing, and that's why I love James. Even though I'm not even a huge fan of the majority of his movies, I will always love and respect James Wan.
Yes,
for Malignant, he could never make another half decent movie as long as he lives, and I'll always be like, Malignant. That was such a just walked into the studio and said, "Give me $60 million to just make something asinine," and they were like, "What are we going to say no to James Wan? Yeah, of course we're going to say yes." You know, it was Joe Dante. It was Gremlins 2. It was his Gremlins 2.
There you go.
Yeah.
Have you seen James's Dead Silence?
That no, that's the one with the dummy. Is it
the ventriloquist doll? Yeah. Exactly.
So that's part of the whole like Conjuring universe too, right?
No,
that's
that was
right Saw and Conjuring.
I think it was right after Saw. He did that was the second movie, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I have not, but I guess I just assumed. You know what? I'm getting it mixed up with Annabelle.
Yeah, exactly.
Another doll,
similar,
which is fair.
Yeah. That's what I mixed up with.
Yeah, Dead Silence is one that I remember not liking when I first saw it, but I guess it has like a little bit of a cult following now. Like the more,
yeah,
the more,
it's more
the more
charming with age.
Yeah. I think the
Yeah.
more successful his other movies got after that, people have gone back and watched it. And
I just saw it, and I just saw Slappy from the Goosebumps.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
I'm a massive Goosebumps fan, and yeah,
me too. I love
same
Goosebumps,
yeah.
but I guess that's why I was like, you know what? If I want silly dummies, like I'll just go watch Goosebumps.
Go read Night.
You know, I'll go.
Yeah,
I'll go watch the Fox Kids, reruns of the old Goosebumps.
Where Ryan Gosling got his start.
Oh yeah, that show is
God
what
tier,
and I don't even mean this in a bad way at all. It is painfully Canadian. That show.
I know exactly
that show. And Are You Afraid of the Dark? I mean, I grew up on those.
Yeah.
Those were two. Are You Afraid of the Dark is just painfully Canadian.
I did not realize that.
Oh, there's so many stories, and it's just
that is awesome.
Well, while watching The Wailing today, because Jackson kind of reminded me of when he said that, some aspects of horror is like sad state for some aspects of the horror genre where we're getting like, whether you want it or not, you're getting like The Exorcist Believer, and then we're getting another Saw, and like there's that happening. While watching this though, after it was over, I was like, I need to like go down the rabbit hole of discovering other movies like this, or like maybe watching more like Korean horror films. I haven't really watched a lot, so I maybe kind of want to open myself up more to doing that than getting like maybe getting upset about the current state of horror. Like whatever, I'll just go back and watch some
go
stuff.
Explore other countries. Yeah, bookmark. I saw The Devil Gaze because that's high on my rewatch list.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. I got to assume you've seen Train to Busan. Have you seen Train to Busan?
I have years ago now, but
that's an easy one. That was absolutely amazing as well.
Yeah, I just watched the sequel Peninsula not too long ago. It's
I
it's
that.
good. It's good. It's good enough. But I gotta turn you on to another one that came out 2022. It's called Project Wolf Hunting.
Okay,
I've heard
me on
to
this one too.
Yeah,
it's
this movie
wild.
Fucks. This movie fucks.
It does. It really does. It's so wild.
And it's kind of like this movie in that like it's 2.5 hours long, and there's a switch from genre, but like the genre is just from action to horror film, and it's insane and brutal. And since you guys said you like the sadness, you'll absolutely love this one.
All right,
okay,
adding it to the list.
Bookmarking that.
Adding it to the list for sure.
Sorry, one more time. That title.
Project Wolf Hunting.
Okay, writing that one down.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you anything else about it.
Okay, that's fine.
No, I was going to say, usually, when we get final thoughts of the movie, we gotta ask, if you can give the film a score after you're watching it this time, like what would you give it? And also with this, I mean, would you feel comfortable kind of suggesting this movie to watch to other like horror fans? Like they'd be like, oh, I think you might enjoy this, and think they'd be receptive to it.
Yeah, what are we rating it? 1 to
however you guys like to do it. We'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, we don't really do a lot of we just kind of broadly always talk about like we loved it or it sucked,
Right,
so
okay.
I'll try to put a
you can do numerical or letter grade if you like.
Oh man, I mean I gotta give this movie I'm gonna be a little bit picky and call it an A- because it's really awesome. I think there are parts that are like almost intentionally, there's just a lot of redirects, and that's not a bad thing.
Right.
It's just, and Steve teases me sometimes about this too, because I always I want to have been able to find the breadcrumbs, even if I'm not smart enough or observant enough to pick it up. I want them to be there, and then it was like I don't feel like I've been cheated or something like that. We were watching an Argento film recently, Opera, and Steve was defending the movie, and I was trying to come up with things I didn't like about it, but I do like the movie. And ultimately, that was my thing. I was like, yeah, the person that was ultimately responsible was like, oh, it was that guy who came out and how was I supposed to know it was that guy, and that kind of burns me sometimes when it's the case. This doesn't do that. It's not anywhere near as it's not by any means egregious in terms of its misleads. It's just it's got a really strong mystery to it. It's got a complex story. ultimately, like I said, maybe the one character I didn't like was the Lady in White. Okay. Not the performance, not that I thought she was wonderful. I just feel like if we would have got maybe one or two more like instances of her being more having more of a redeeming nature, maybe
for us to really know what her purpose and nature is.
Yeah, and it's like I get it that they made a decision to go, no, we want to keep her purposefully ambiguous so that there really is a question at the end and we really do surprise you at the end. And I think ultimately the film was better for it, and maybe this was an unsolvable thing that I'm asking for, but I wish we knew just even a little bit more about her, even if it was misleading. I just feel like she wasn't in it enough to play as big of a role as she did, I guess, in the story. That was my only really, I mean, and I'm splitting hairs here. That was my only, thing I guess I didn't love about it. And I love quick and dirty movies. And this was long. It was long. It earned it. It's fine. It was the right length. Like, I don't think you would have cut stuff out of it, but it's like 2 hours and 45 minutes is a long ass time. So I'm gonna go A-. But I would definitely suggest to people, especially, I wouldn't suggest to everyone.
Of course,
you know what I mean? Like it is a 2 hour and 45 minute Korean horror movie with tons of religious undertones. So that's not an everyone. That's not a blockbuster.
No.
Yeah.
But if that's up your alley, then hell yeah, check that out.
If you're a film fan, and if you are a fan of just foreign horror in general, not even necessarily Eastern horror, like absolutely, I would suggest it.
Right on.
I'd give it probably 7.5 out of 10. But a lot of the same things that Brian's already said. It is beautifully shot, which is well worth saying. Like if you like the way Snowpiercer and Parasite look, then obviously you have to watch this. And I believe the camera operator that was on the B unit underneath the cinematographer on this film went on to be the cinematographer for Decision to Leave. So, but if you find yourself like, if you like Decision to Leave and you like Project Wolf Hunting and you like I Saw the Devil, you'll like this film, is the way I can put it, because those are all excellent 2+ hour long films that have constantly revealing and changing characters in all of them. So it's well worth all of that time spent. It's just time spent.
Right.
I'll say for me, I don't, kind of my negative points are also on the ending. Like I like kind of going back and seeing the breadcrumbs. There are a lot. Like you see the breadcrumbs with the shaman that he burned down the house. And then there's the other family that they discover is in the well. And it's obvious that they were having the shaman over because you see all of his tools scattered all over the place. And then you get more breadcrumbs from, the Japanese man. You see all of his misdeeds, more or less. So you're supposed to believe him, but it's just the ending feels like too easy that it is him. Like I just really wanted the scientist to come in and say, fucking knock it off, bums.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cut all this hokum out. It's not religious. Stop it.
It's the crow. It's the crow in the soy sauce all along.
Yeah. It's because, like Brian was saying, we don't get enough time with the mysterious woman. She doesn't have.
You're right.
She doesn't really have interactions with anybody except Officer Daddy and spying on the Japanese man. So, like, if she had some sort of benevolence towards the daughter or something. Just one little extra thing to give us the breadcrumb.
I just got this. I'm sorry I interrupt. Hey, you guys, this just was like a lightning bolt here. When they hit the freaking the demon with the truck.
Yeah.
I kind of didn't look. She pushed him out in front of the truck.
Yeah, she threw him down the hill. Yeah.
You see her in the background too when they throw his body over the guardrail. She's like in the distance in the background.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt you with the fact that I'm dumb, but I literally just got that. Yeah.
Yeah. How else would he have gotten?
I don't know. I'm dumb.
Yeah.
I was like, he just had an oopsie. He fell down the hill. He's old.
Yeah. But it's like,
yeah.
why would he do that oopsie when he was just hiding from them? No, she
mean,
picked him up and chucked him like a sack of potatoes.
Well, then why doesn't she just chuck him around all the time then? Come on. Why don't you just take him out back and beat him with a hose? Like,
she says some shit about him not being able to be touched by death.
Yeah.
So,
she had some faith to test as well too, right? It would have been too easy if she could just put him down.
So I think I subconsciously realized that she had something wrong with that, but it just occurred to me that she threw him in front of the truck, and I feel like a moron. But yeah.
But
no, don't feel like a moron. There's a lot to unpack in this movie. I honestly didn't even really associate her with putting him in harm's way there. I see her in the scene in the background, and when he falls off the cliff, he sees her there, and he's clearly like afraid of her, but didn't really occur to me necessarily how he ended up in front of their car.
Yeah,
but
I guess she didn't necessarily have to have chucked him. She might have chased him or something, but like it just occurred to me that it was her fault or it was her doing, I guess.
Yeah.
Gaius, I'll round this out. I want to hear what you thought too before I go.
All right. I gave it, I would say like an 8.5. Like you said, I loved how it was shot. Again, it was just a beautiful looking movie. That's one of the first things I thought when I was watching it, which is kind of funny when you're watching a horror movie and like, oh, this is just a pretty film. But it just looks rich. Like, it looks really rich. And I think on top of that too, we talked about the two other horror movies that have more complexities to their stories, and this does. There's a lot more going on than what's on the surface. Like, we talked about Hereditary a lot, where that movie is a family drama about grief first, and then it's a horror movie. Right. So there's a lot more going on in that. So like I love when horror movies do that. And
agreed.
And also, like I said, even if you aren't like drawn in by a lot of the story, I don't see how you wouldn't be. But just looking at individual moments and just the imagery from the film, like that will just, a lot of this stuff in it will just stick with me. Like, and just like these isolated moments of like just generally like freaky stuff that happens in the film. that I was watching it this morning. I kept wanting to like message you, but I didn't want to get too much into like talking about it in case I said something there that we can say here. But yeah, it was just completely involving. I was engaged by like most of it. I think the only reason that I wouldn't go any higher is that it is long. But like I said, I didn't feel the length. It went by fairly quickly, and I never felt like it dragged. But a lot of us talk about the sweet spot for a horror movie is like a solid like 90 minutes, depending on the movie, depending on the horror movie. Once you start getting into 2 hours, it's like
I could have watched Pieces twice.
Yeah.
In this
and then like suggesting it, I think there are certain horror fans I could suggest it to, and they would be into it. I just know that the big sticking point would be the length. And like, oh, that's a really long movie. But if I kind of sold it on like, it is worth it. The payoff's worth it. I think you'll enjoy it. I think I can convince them. But yeah, also like, I think Brian said, it's also not for everyone. There's a lot of stuff in here that isn't for everyone, and especially with the ties to like religion and all that. That's not going to be for everyone at all. They're like, all right, no, that's
well.
Not my
sometimes
bag.
People, it just can go. We, like I said, we would tease Meg sometimes, like jokingly, obviously, because we, she just didn't. She wasn't ingrained in that her entire life,
right?
So why would it resonate with her, right? So we would always give her a hard time about hey, this movie, Darren Aronofsky moves,
yeah,
or Darren Aronofsky mother,
yes.
Obviously
I love Gaius hates.
Super, like we were just teasing her about these super heavy-handed religious overtones, and she was like, they didn't feel heavy-handed to me because I didn't grow up with this. It's not second nature to me. And I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But we, just good-natured, like giving her a hard time and stuff. But this just reminded me, Gase, when you said this was like if the runtime, sometimes when you suggest a movie that's this long, it feels like an imposition, even just to suggest it.
Right. Yes.
Like, do you think I have that much time?
Yeah. But like, are you serious? Like, you're gonna seriously, because now I have to watch it because you're gonna ask me about it, and like, how dare you?
Yeah, you're right.
Ask me to me. So
that being said, when you do have the time to watch it, this should be something that you should save and definitely watch. And so when it comes down to it, if you got the nearly 3 hours to spare, then that would be a great way to fill that time slot. That's how I look at it too. But
by the way, I speaking of Mother, I was on like a 2-week long apology tour with my friends for making them see that with me. They were like, what the fuck did you make us watch? I was like, I don't know.
Did you ever rewatch it?
I haven't. And you brought this up. I think when you first got on the show, like we brought this movie up before. You were like, you should rewatch it.
Yeah.
Who knows? I might rewatch it and be like, oh,
my mind has changed plenty of times on rewatch, and I saw it a couple times in theaters as well. And yeah, I'm super due, so that could be something we slot in the future because I would love to see Mother.
That was one of my favorite conversations on our podcast because we were so split, and sometimes Steve and I, agree maybe too much, but like Meg loved it and we both hated it. And so we were just at each other's. She was like, "You snobby assholes," and we were like, and we also both, I think, genuinely dislike Darren Aronofsky as a human. Like, just like we just think he's kind of like a pompous douche. So it was that played into it too a little bit, and so at this point, we were at each other's throats at that.
Yeah, we don't even hate all his movies because like we both we like The Wrestler a lot.
Yeah, I love The Wrestler.
It's just when he gets into this, this snooty like religious overtones that he feels like the smartest kid in Brooklyn. He's like he doesn't like he's not that smart, but he's the smartest kid in Brooklyn. So he has all these wild thoughts of like, I'm making a Jesus Mary Magdalene allegory, and it's like, shut up, dude.
We get it. It's Cain and Abel. Like I remember we were joking the second the two brothers came in, we were like, it's Cain and Abel. That's Cain and Abel. Like,
yeah. Once you know what he's going for, everything after that is pretty obvious for sure.
Yeah, we were like, is he going to look outside and there's a whale on the front lawn? Like a dude pops his head out of the blowholes. Like, what's going on, guys?
I think on my G-Reels Instagram movie page, I wrote a story about, I think he got an F cinema score when it came out. And that story on my Instagram, I think has the most comments of any story I ever posted. It was 180 comments. And there was a lot of people that loved it. And a lot of people that hated it just going at it in the comments. I didn't even I didn't even bother commenting. I was like, I'm just gonna let this go.
Well,
I don't know what's going on.
Movie. Like it's visually a beautiful movie. The performances are great. There's a lot of technically sound filmmaking there. It's just the story and the allegories and just the heavy-handedness of it all was, I think, my big again. I feel like I'm just sound like an elitist snobby asshole saying this,
but I mean they're the least hidden allegories is the thing.
I know
because we talked about like the Christian themes in this one, and like it seemed like 3/4 of us here didn't remember Peter and the cock crowing reference in this movie.
I completely forgot about that.
Whereas again, Mother, we look at it and we go, yeah, this is like the first book. This is Genesis. All right already.
This is the Sorcerer's Stone, guys. It's right there. Yeah,
exactly. I bet you I would find it over heavy-handed too, because I saw the movie came out in 2017,
something like
that. Yeah, I was still pretty young at that time, and that stuff all wasn't apparent to me. And upon realizing this stuff, not even while watching, but afterwards and reviewing, I was like, oh my god, this movie's so smart. But that being said, I'm a few years off that watch, so my mind could change too, Gaius, but it would be good conversation. I bet if we're still split.
Yeah, it would be a good one to rewatch. I mean, I wish my friend we went out to a bar after that movie was, and they all they talked about for an hour was like, I can't believe you made us go see that, and I was like, I'm sorry.
They devoured a baby and ripped it to pieces.
Yeah, I mean,
you guys want some jalapeno poppers?
I was like, will shots make this better? I don't know. What about you, Jackson? What's your
just before that? I just wanted to mention, because I don't know when else I'll get the chance to sneak in this tidbit, but I'm glad you mentioned Hereditary, because it reminded me one little tidbit about the movie that I had read was that this was one of Ari Aster's, if not, I can't remember how it was posed, but I think his favorite horror movie of the last 10 years.
10 years, I saw that
come
too,
out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was
cool.
like, that's pretty cool because he's one of the guys in horror that I really respect.
But he does the, obviously, especially in that movie, he does the familial relationship trauma stuff so well.
Exactly.
It makes a lot of sense.
Definitely. You can see some inspiration perhaps. But I, especially after hearing your guys' scores, I may have rose colored glasses on in terms of my enjoyment for this movie. Even that compounded with what I consider like the quality of the filmmaking dynamics. It's a 10 out of 10 for me. One I would come back to. I'll put a couple years between this watch because I've seen it a couple times relatively close together, but one I'm already really looking forward to seeing in the future. I hope I forget some aspects about it, but there's really nothing in this movie like that I didn't that was a detriment. Like I'm happy with the runtime in the sense that it all paid off in the end, and I was very satisfied with the ending. Had a lot of components of horror movies that I generally really like. Very great performance driven. Looked fantastic. Cinematography was gorgeous. Really like the score, which is definitely a foundational part of any horror movie. Nothing in here that I can take points away. That might change in the future, but right now it was one of those rewatches that I already liked it to begin with, and I came away appreciating more. And so I could say it's a 9, but I just don't know where I would take that point away from. So 10 out of 10 for the Wailing for myself.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys all liked it though, and had some good things to say about it. And I honestly, talking about it too, just enlightened me on some things too, especially the religious aspects of it. So appreciate that, because this was definitely a complex and dense film. So lots still to learn.
Well, I want to thank both of you guys for joining us, Brian and Steve. Like I said, this has only been going for 2 weeks. So when we had Alex and Dean on from their podcast, and then you guys on it, conversation was effortless, so that's always a good thing when we have guests on.
Can't ask for anything more than that.
And we would love to have you guys back anytime. So thank you guys for coming on and talking this film. And of course, you can tell everyone where they can find your podcast, and of course, we were going to link all your stuff at the bottom of the description of the episode on our platforms as well. But wherever they can find you, you can let them know right now.
Yeah, sure. Just search Halloween is Forever and you'll get everything. Like, we host on Podbean, but we're on Spotify, Pandora, Apple, we're everywhere. And then just search Halloween is Forever on any social and we should pop up. And Halloween is Forever patreon.com/Halloween is Forever. And then you can get like some bonus stuff. We do written reviews and bonus clips like wrestling that gets cut out of 4-hour podcasts. And you can get our Family is Forever, which is our Fast and the Furious rewatch.
Nice.
I'm going to get into that. I support all of that.
That has you written all over it.
It is
does have me written all over it.
I hate watching the movies so much, but I love talking about them. It's literally it's just me and Steve talking about how much I hate it, and me like having an existential crisis, and Steve laughing at me, and that's pretty much what it is. But
I'm in the middle of you guys. There's some I really like, and some I could never consider watching.
And then what's the segment at the end? It's like my mental health check, Steve. What is
we do at the end of every episode we do an oil check, and that's where I just have like a list of questions, and it's like a check-in on Brian's mental health, who his favorite character is, what he thinks happens in the next movie. Like, we're pretty early on. We're gonna record Tokyo Drift coming up this week.
Oh, fantastic.
But like, I know for me personally, I feel like the show is really going to shift into gear.
Don't do it. Stop.
But I feel like
flawless.
Yeah.
I feel like once we get to Fast 5, he'll turn around, because it's good. You guys will probably agree with me. Fast 5 is when it really, turns up.
It turns on. It's like,
I think
what happened to street racing?
It definitely segues, but Tokyo Drift, I think, bridges that gap pretty well. It's still a street racing movie, but it also turns up the dial. You'll enjoy. I think if there's one that you enjoy,
10 months, and I'm going to be driving around in a pink, Mitsubishi Lancer.
Yeah, exactly.
Six shifts. You're gonna be all in.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like it would be an interesting conversation. For sure.
Well, thank you guys again for joining us. We have I'm glad that we covered this one because we're gonna be covering a lot of different types of horror movies throughout the next few months. I know we have a Cabin Fever episode coming up soon, and Urban Legend, both of them having anniversaries, one 20th, one 25th, and then we're gonna try to fit in a James Wan discussion this September, which is kind of funny as we kind of did a little bit, like 3 minutes of that with you guys. And then October is going to get really crazy with a lot of other stuff that we're trying to fit in as well.
There'll be some busy boys over here at Back to the Blockbuster.
Nice. But Jackson, you can sign us on off.
Absolutely, guys. Okay, with all that being said, this has been episode 121 of Back to the Blockbuster. Very special thanks to Brian and Steve for joining us, where we covered The Wailing. Great discussion overall, guys. You guys are welcome back anytime. For those of you just tuning in, you guys can find us at Back to the Blockbuster anywhere on your socials and anywhere you guys get your podcasts. For those of you Apple users on the iOS store, you guys can find us on the Playlist app. Go check it out. Just launched in July. It's fantastic. They love us over there. We love them back. Coming soon to Samsung devices too. And thanks again, guys, for tuning in. Brian, Steve, great having you guys. Great discussion. Gaius,
thank you.
See you next week.
Yeah, it was fun.
Take care of yourselves, guys.